On today's episode of the Going Commando podcast, we have our 2024 NFL Draft Special. We sat down and recorded live during the first round last week, giving instantaneous reaction to each of the top 10 selections, as well as the Eagles and Cowboys picks, as we were joined by recurring guests Jacob Shetterly and Jacob Brassard. So without further ado, we hope you enjoy this show, and let's get it started. Welcome to Going Commando, a Washington Commanders podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Going Commando Draft Day Special, night one here, Thursday night. Obviously very exciting for us Commanders fans. We also have a few other fans with us today, a special episode, as it were. I'm, of course, joined by my usual co-hosts, Chris and Clark. Also joining us, two returning guests to Draft Day, pundits here to really give their analysis on who their teams are going to take. Maybe if their teams are going to move. We have an Eagles fan with us in Jacob Brassard, and we have a Cowboys fan with us in Jacob Shetterly. Hello, gentlemen. How are you boys?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
It's a great holiday Thursday.
We have been waiting for this day.
Thursday.
At least I can speak to the Commanders / Washington fans here. We have been waiting for this draft. I would say since we got the new ownership in the room. So I'm excited. Obviously, a very high pick due to the progress or lack thereof last season. But overall, hoping for a good draft, not only today but the other 2 days that will soon follow.
Yeah, great to be here. It's a wonderful holiday, as Brass alluded to, the first Thursday night of the NFL draft. And as you alluded to as well, Chris, this is a very big one for the Washington Commanders, holding the number 2 overall pick. This is a pick that's really going to, it's going to paint the picture of this franchise for years to come. This could be potential of a franchise, changing player coming in, or, we've also seen picks like this go in the wrong direction. So, and then of course with Brass and Shetterly here, I think this second overall pick for us is just as important as any pick you guys might be making tonight. Because if we pick the guy, then things could be troublesome for you two franchises down the line. We'll see.
Absolutely. And I think, we've avoided talking about this subject on the podcast until the appropriate time. And what more appropriate time than draft day? Obviously, this is a Commanders podcast, so we will be starting by talking about the number 2 overall pick, presumptively at this point being Jayden Daniels. Obviously, a little bit of controversy. His agent didn't necessarily like the treatment that he received in his visit to Washington, made that very known, and that became a point of contention. Almost, you saw money betting lines on who's going number 2 overall seemingly shift a little bit to Drake May, and making it maybe a bit more even with those two. However, it seems as we get closer to this, most people are speculating it to be Jayden Daniels. I've, of course, said that I'm not necessarily a believer. I've said that I want to trade down and draft Brock Bowers. I stand by that position. I don't think that we have the team necessary for him. But I'd like to hear your guys' takes on this. Clark, I see you seem to be having a very urgent message for the audience.
Because we have breaking news. We have breaking news from Adam Schefter 8 minutes ago. The Eagles and Pro Bowl wide receiver A.J. Brown have reached an agreement on a 3-year, $96 million extension that includes $84 million guaranteed per sources. The $32 million is the highest per year average for any wide receiver in the NFL. They got a deal done. Brass, AJ is locked in here, and it looks like at a very very solid price tag.
Jalen Hurts has his guy. The offense is set for the next couple of years here. Saquon's on a contract for 3 years. Now A.J. Brown's extended. Smith just a few weeks ago. This is going to be a dangerous offense for years to come. And now I think, prelude a little bit to the Eagles, I think Howie's going to continue building upon the offense in the first round here too.
Well, if it's any indication of how your boy who just got his payday there fared against our number one pick last season, I would say that was a good move that you all made, and one that us fans here in Washington and around the NFC East are gonna feel the full force of, I'm sure.
Hey, this is a good cornerback draft. It's not too late for some NFC East teams to start paying attention to that.
That is something, possibly to keep an eye on. Obviously, I think it goes without saying that we're probably going to take a quarterback at number 2 here tonight, but cornerback is a position of need that I think we kind of addressed. We talked about it in our last episode, the free agency episode. And Forbes as well. If any of you fans of our program were tuning into this episode last year, there's the famous quote from Tom that took place the instant we drafted Forbes. I believe it went something like, "Well, we shit the bed." It turned out probably to be true in the moment, but I'm hoping that we don't have any reactions like that tonight.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. Like last year, we really had not nearly as a kind of a picture as we do this year as what kind of pick, who they're going for, or obviously what position. So I'm curious, what are your all's thoughts? Like, let's get down to what we think about, who this pick is going to be or what they're going to do with that pick. I'll start off by first saying I feel like it's been such a kind of a closed book, right? That the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams. It almost has me worried. Like, has that all been like just a facade, and they're really just gonna, flip the script and take a guy like Jaden Daniels first overall, and then to really just flip the whole narrative of what everyone has been saying is going to happen thus far. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I don't think that will happen, but just something that came to mind when I was kind of thinking about this earlier today. But obviously, I think as a lot of us here might say, I am kind of in the Jaden Daniels camp. Would like to see him come to us at number 2. But yeah, curious what some other guys' thoughts here might be.
I think the Commanders had a good offseason. I really liked the signing of Frankie Lovu. I really like Fowler. I think Zach Ertz had some injury issues the past years, but being an Eagles fan, he knows how to get open. I think he'll be great for any quarterback. I think there's a lot of pressure to get this pick right. And I think Jaden Daniels is 100% the right move. A guy that can scramble a bit, move around in the pocket, has a lot of versatility. And I just don't think Drake May is going to be able to go in and perform quite at a level ready to win in a pretty tough division in the NFL too. So I think Jaden Daniels is just the right move to make here.
I would draft Drake May. Daniels just scares me. If anyone's watched him play for 5 downs, you've probably seen him get murdered. It's not a great thing you like to see in a quarterback, but then if you watch 5 more plays, he might do something incredible. And that's why he's probably going to go number 2 in the NFL draft. And I get it, but I mean, if I was a Commanders fan, I'd be terrified.
What makes you say Drake May over Daniels? What is it more so just reservations about Daniels as opposed to like I'm in love with Drake May?
From what I've seen from Drake May, which is admittedly not that much, but I really liked what I saw in college. Good decision maker, strong arm. He's just NFL body, looks like an NFL quarterback, just perfect intangibles and all that nonsense. But, that's all true. And he doesn't get killed every set of downs. Like,
Hey,
it's not
Drake May does not
not
have the
like
experience Jaden Daniel has. He's been in college a lot longer, and not only that, he's improved while in college too. Winning the Heisman this
That's
past
true.
year, he's gotten better, and he's played a lot more football and is ready to go in and start winning.
Now, I hate to be sort of the contrarian here. I really don't think that there's a clear cut two in this draft between the two. I think that both of them have their issues. Drake May obviously playing in sort of a lighter football ACC, something that might have inflated his stats a little bit. I know that's a weird thing to say, and obviously the great players shine in whatever league that they're in, but I'm not necessarily very trustworthy of UNC quarterbacks, especially how our last UNC quarterback sort of panned out for us. And obviously, we're very thankful for the opportunity to see Sam Howell play. However, we did move on. And as for Jaden Daniels, I mean, I think I'm the person who's the most comfortable with Jaden Daniels here in terms of knowing about this guy. I mean, he played at ASU. His first year there was my freshman year. Obviously, he sort of made a name for himself that freshman year by beating the Justin Herbert senior year Oregon Ducks, who were thought to be a playoff contender until that loss in Tempe, Arizona. Of course, he can do it with his legs. That is the truth. He can do it with his legs. However, Jacob makes a very valid point, and it's very rare that I agree with Jacob on something. He does surrender himself to a lot of big hits, and he doesn't really know how to go down as easily as some of the other guys in the position. So, I mean, I think his upside is certainly much higher than Drake Mays and what he can just bring to your football team with his raw talent. I think if all things pan out, I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that a taller Jalen Hurts comp wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But I think that his floor could definitely be pretty low, especially if that mobility is lost from taking a lot of big hits and sort of not being able to absorb that contact. So, I don't think that there's a clear two out of those two, but I think that if I'm right, and I believe I am, I will always be cursed with having to see Jaden Daniels play a year of football for the teams that I watch. And I think that he's going to be the number 2 overall pick tonight.
I have a question for you, not for you Commanders fans. Is it a non-zero probability that JJ McCarthy is number 2?
Is it a non-zero probability? I don't think anything it's necessarily a non-zero. But just from everything that I've been seeing, it seems like Daniels is going to be the guy. And I'll tell you one thing, JJ McCarthy, I feel like he's been labeled by everybody because he's been shooting up draft boards, this offseason, more so than what people were thinking during the college football year. He didn't get to really show off as much as he could have because of the offense that they ran. They're run heavy offense. So, there's a chance that this guy has some talent. And however, if that is in fact the pick at number 2, we just have to wait and see how the reaction would be on this call.
And I think one thing that I do kind of want your guys' perspective on as both Eagles and Cowboys fans. I mean, you guys obviously have 2 very dominant defenses. They're some of the most formidable in the league, and really sort of turn it into the NFC beast that we've been calling it for the past few years here. When you think about a guy going to quarterback for the Commanders, and you think about when you think about that game for your team's prospects, are you more scared if you see a guy like Jaden Daniels on the field because you're worried about that mobility? Or do you think that Drake May would be more of a threat in our system with that arm strength and that arm talent and that traditional sort of quarterback presence that maybe our air raid offense OC Cliff Kingsbury would like?
I think you 100% have to be more scared of Jaden Daniels, especially the way the Cowboys and the Eagles both kind of build up that front down low. They like to get pass rushers who aggressively attack the quarterback. And if you have a quarterback that can step up in the pocket and slip away, it might be too late for some of the edge rushers that are going straight for the sack. And that can be really dangerous, especially when both the Eagles and the line and Cowboys don't really have great linebacker options right now. Eagles are kind of taking a chance on Devin White. Obviously, the Cowboys had Van Der Esch retire, so there's not a lot of guys that are ready to help contain the QB beyond the line of scrimmage. So I think Daniels 100% could be a bigger threat.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of you guys have kind of mentioned it earlier, but just the thing for me that gives Daniels the edge is he's got a lot of experience playing college ball. He's not one of these guys that, has a one really good year where he's been playing and then gets drafted and with really altogether not that much experience. He can run absolutely, but he's also, not afraid to kind of sit back and make the throws within the pocket. So and also to quell any kind of he's coming out on the older side of things. I mean, I think that you're going to continue to see guys come out of college older than we're used to seeing them, due to obviously NIL, in addition to the COVID years and things like that. But just even more so, I think you're going to see guys staying in college a little bit longer because they're making money to do so. So just more reasons why I think it will be Jaden Daniels. I believe so. But again, I think anything can happen. I know I mentioned earlier, flipping the script, perhaps even with the first pick. We also don't necessarily know what this ownership's going to do. I mean, we think the telegraph move appears to be Jaden Daniels, but they've been known to kind of play things close to the chest. If they think they could maybe even trade back, pick up one of these quarterbacks in the later first round, like um, Michael Penix or like a Bo Nix or any, I'm not saying we do this, right? But maybe there's a guy the staff's identified as a guy that they think they can go with and pick up a lot more value along the way. It wouldn't necessarily, um, it would surprise me for sure, but it wouldn't necessarily like knock my socks off as being out the door impossible.
Obviously, your guys' teams have quite consequential picks in this draft tonight. As obviously, Jacob, your Cowboys have been one of the least active teams in free agency. This will be one of the first players that you see added to your roster this offseason. I'm just curious, where do you see the Cowboys going in this draft? Do you think that they try and fill some of those offensive line holes they may have gotten over the offseason? Do you think that they try and get your guy Dak some more weapons? Do they fill linebacker holes even? Depending on what the need is at that time. What do you think?
So honestly, they haven't done a sensible thing all off season. So I don't know what they're gonna do. I have an inclination that it's gonna be offensive line. It seems like this would be the time to do it. Protect Dak, hopefully convince him to stay. God help us all. But this is a deep offensive line draft. They need offensive linemen. Seems like the right thing to do.
Yeah, especially with some departures in free agency on that line. Of
Retirement
course,
too.
notably Tyler Biotish, brand new starting center, seemingly starting center for the Washington Commanders. Of course, can't be overstated there. But you are right. This is a deep draft, particularly tackles wise. Um, with that being said, a theory that I've been seeing that I kind of want to float out to the crowd here is that some people think that the Washington Commanders might be making more than one selection tonight. And some people seem to think that it's entirely possible that the Commanders could trade back into the first round, more than likely with the intention of drafting one of these offensive tackles, depending on if guys fall to a certain spot and whatnot. But what do you guys think about that? Seemingly, or what do you guys think about that? Uh, Especially my Commanders fans, it would probably require us to give up a good chunk of our day 2 picks, which we have a lot of.
Yeah, I could see that for sure happening. I mean, we've done it before, albeit under previous ownership, right? I mean, we went up and got Montez Sweat after already taking Dwayne Haskins in the first round. So, we've done it before as a team. Yeah, that neither of those players are with the team anymore, and one had obviously a tragic death not too long ago. So neither of those picks clearly worked out for the franchise. But that said, I could easily see it. Clark, as you referenced, we have multiple day 2 picks and several second round picks that are very early into the second round. So those could absolutely be chips that Peters and company use to move back up into the first round and get a tackle they like. If they start to see a run on tackles early on and they get a little nervous, I'm sure there's a contingency plan in place tonight for that. I'm sure there's several plans that they have in place, a whole plethora of plans based on situations and how the board goes tonight, right? About what they're going to do and how they're going to pivot. So it will be interesting to see. Again, you're talking about trading back in. I'm talking about trading back, back down, so who knows what'll happen? We'll just have to kind of wait and see.
Do you think if a team like the Broncos, who are looking to build some capital back after that Russell Wilson trade, are willing to either trade back or trade their pick? If you don't have another first round pick, is that going to involve a player if you trade with the Broncos?
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of forget about players, being part of draft packages on draft night, but it's totally possible. I don't think as a Commanders, I don't think as a Commanders team we have that many chips left that we're willing to part with for one or two just in general. So I couldn't imagine many players that would be involved in a trade with us. I could see maybe if shipping out a guy like Jonathan Allen. I know that's been tossed around, but they've since reaffirmed him as being a part of their plan moving forward. So I really don't think that would happen. I don't know, Clark, Tom, you think that's in the realm of possibilities for us?
It's only time will tell. A player being involved, again, as you mentioned, the salary, that would have to match up and everything. I don't know that there's anybody that we would necessarily be trying to move off of right now. It seems like a lot of our guys that, were maybe on the fence were just ended up not being re-signed. So I don't know that there's really anybody that you could look at that one would also be worth like a first round designation that we would be willing to part ways with. So it's an interesting theory for sure. And we're going to have to be keeping our eyes peeled as this thing continues on. Looks like they are getting ready to start the draft right now. They've got some
Clock's about
Detroit
to start.
Lions players on. The clock is about to start for the Chicago Bears, which can only mean one thing. It means that the Washington Commanders are on deck, ladies and gentlemen.
I hope the Bears are kind to us and just submit this Caleb Williams pick fast, because I think we're going to have some full 10 minutes these next 5 picks.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they are dead set on Caleb Williams. I would expect this pick to be in sooner rather than later. If they let it go all the way, I might get a little nervous, to be honest.
I will say that the Bears Panthers trade thing just popped up on my screen, and for a half second, I almost shit my pants. Pardon my language there, but no, that is how the Bears did end up getting this pick, of course, last year. The trade for Bryce Young. Yeah, the Panthers. You want to talk about a team that is, could be doing better. To have the season they had, and then to not be able to have your own number 1 overall pick is not the spot you want to be in.
And they had turnover. Obviously, we have Luvu and Chin now. I mean, they're losing their key players as well. So tough look for the Carolinas.
I love to point out that it was a David Mills last-minute touchdown for the Texans that got Bryce Young to Carolina instead of probably ending up on the Texans and having a much, much better season with a lot more weapons.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this Bears team is that you see them make all these moves last year. They kind of put together a competitive roster, and then it all kind of just ends up going wrong for them, obviously. They still end up with the 9th overall pick here with their own pick. So this is going to be a big draft for them. This could be something that changes the tides of their franchise. Obviously, Jacob is a big believer in who they will likely be taking with the 1st overall pick, but I'm curious as to who they'll take with the 9th overall pick, as I believe that guy will make a bigger statement about where this Bears team thinks it'll be heading in the near future.
Yeah, I do think that this Bears team has set up, their 1st overall player very well. Uh, their defense really came alive kind of at the end of last season, and they've seemingly done a good job surrounding prospect number one here with a plenty of weapons. I mean, they brought in Keenan Allen, DJ Moore is already there, Cole Kmet's a solid tight end. I think I could expect maybe an offensive lineman to be the selection for them at number 9, or it's entirely possible for them to be on the move again with that pick. So I think it's very possible that we could have a busy first round uh, with regard to teams moving around, possibly.
Last year the Bears did move. They had an opportunity to select Jalen Carter, but decided to trade with the Eagles. And I think they might be having a little bit of seller's remorse after last season, seeing how well Carter played for the Eagles this snaps. So maybe they go D tackle here. They fix the mistake they made last year and go with the Byron Murphy. Take a top D tackle prospect and start building out that D line. They got their edge rusher from the Commanders and a trade, and now they got to build that interior.
Yeah, have a guy like Sweat, take a guy under his wing. I understand what you're saying. I don't think it'll be the first overall pick, but hey, anything's possible.
I'm saying 9. I'm saying 9.
Oh, you're saying 9. Okay. Fair. That's a lot more realistic. And Sweat, yeah, that is a guy that y'all have from our team now, and he actually went off when y'all got him. So we might have a little bit of remorse there. I would have liked to keep him if we could have kept at least one of the two. Obviously him and Chase Young, another former second overall pick for the Washington Commanders. Speaking of second overall picks, I feel like it's embarrassing to say that I've lived through this many, and the Commanders fans on this line have lived through this many second overall picks. I mean, this isn't the first time we've taken. I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but this wouldn't be the first time we've taken a quarterback at 2. So and we had some fun there, and it didn't pan out long term. And then we actually had another second round pick, obviously more recently, that did not pan out for us as well. So historically, this position hasn't boded well for us. Let's hope we break that tradition tonight.
Yeah, well, it is kind of scary to think that we might be taking a very similar sort of play style player with the second overall pick again. Although I will remind you that, we traded up to that RG3 pick, and it cost us quite a lot. And I believe one of the picks even involved Aaron Donald later down the line. So, I mean,
It's a ripple effect.
It's the butterfly effect of the NFL draft and the trades that occur here, because you just never know what talent you may be missing out on with some of the moves that you make here tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they are showing Jaden Daniels highlights on the draft screen right now, and the first pick still has not been put in. They have taken about 6
Did they
minutes
just
now.
reset the clock?
The pick is in.
They did just reset the clock.
Oh, it's because the pick is in.
You guys are way ahead of me.
I don't think that we should have any question as to what's about to happen here.
Bo Nix, right?
Bo Nix.
And yet, until the name is said, you almost want to believe that we might still be able to get Caleb Williams, the hometown hero, of sorts.
It's still possible, in theory. However, I would be shocked. I would be utterly shocked if that is not the selection.
Roger's taking a sweet time walking to that stage. He had back surgery recently, so I'm gonna have to give him a little while.
And a guy that's not being talked about the number 1 overall pick here, but a guy that I think we will be able to get some good punditry out of Jacob from, is a guy like Joe Alt, who, coming out of Notre Dame, looks to be the best offensive line prospect. Jacob, obviously you have a very good history of knowing Notre Dame linemen with the Cowboys and with your college football proclivities for Notre Dame. What can you say about Joe Alt coming into this draft?
I can't be a man that says he understands offensive lineman play all that well, but I can't say that there was too many times I looked up after Notre Dame getting
Here we go.
Sam Hartman getting sacked and thinking to myself, oh, that was Joel. Didn't happen a lot, That's about as ringing of an endorsement as I can possibly give it on an offensive lineman.
Here we go. Caleb Williams, everyone.
Caleb Williams is officially the number 1 overall pick out of USC to the Chicago Bears. Again, like we said, no surprise here. The draft really starts now, ladies and gentlemen. The draft runs through Washington, and we're gonna find out a lot in the next, 10 or so minutes.
I'm shocked and my parlay is ruined. I just lost $1,000.
Yeah, well, you had
Tough one there.
yeah, Joe Milton penciled in as the number 1 pick here.
I think Xavier Worthy. Thought the speed would get it.
Look at this.
Well, the
Wow,
Raiders aren't
he's hype.
picking first, so you're probably safe.
Did you guys see like they showed the clip of the room? They were all like dapping each other up like in the in the room. Control room, I guess, I don't know why. I mean, it's not like they made a big move here, but
Listen, guys, if we get the control room shot, the war room shot of Commanders, I'm gonna
we
need
will.
everybody locked in. I'm gonna need everybody locked in. We need to see
Right.
how everybody's looking. We need to
I
see
know, I
where
know.
everybody's sitting. There's gonna be a lot that we can be found. And ladies and gentlemen,
It is time
we
to
are on
lock
the
in.
clock.
It's
We
time
are
to
on the
lock
clock.
in.
It is time to lock in. The Washington Commanders are on the clock, ladies and gentlemen. We have waited months for this moment, and we are on the cusp of potentially future franchise player.
Yeah, and this is going to define arguably the next 3 to 5 years of our franchise. Similar to what we thought Chase Young was going to bring to the team. We're hoping that this number 2 overall pick brings a hope and really sort of follows through on that hope. As we kind of rattle down here to the last few minutes of the clock, having our name on it and the pick not being in. Obviously, this is kind of the go time for us. This is the last little bit of crunch time here. Who do you guys believe we will be getting with the number 2 overall pick before you see the announcement?
JD. JD is going to be the pick. And if not, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
I think if it's not Jaden Daniels, I think the Commanders are whipping on this one and putting a pretty sour note on a pretty solid offseason. And I would say a really strong rebuild in just a few months.
Yeah, I mean, all the signs are pointing to a style quarterback like Jaden Daniels as well. I mean, I think he's gonna, like you say, Brass, like there's been a lot of building around a guy, rebolstering of that O line, right? And probably more to come here either tonight or in the next couple days for sure. Added some weapons in the backfield. Added some veterans to this roster to kind of help a young guy like that out. So I'm excited. I agree. I think it's going to be Jaden Daniels. But anything can happen. We are still on the clock, and the clock continues to go down. So nothing is concrete just yet.
You got to field every trade call that comes in, though, right? Just to make sure there's nothing spectacular out there that's too good to give up.
Well, I think one of the interesting things here is that it was only 2 days ago that we learned that the Raiders were potentially in talks to move up to our pick, and that we obviously didn't follow through with that. Adam Peters wanted to hold on to the pick, and they said that he felt secure in taking who he wanted to take.
Gentlemen, we have Adam Peters on the phone with someone in the war room.
Doug Williams.
Doug Williams is clapping his hands at the corner of the table right there. They're talking to somebody. Who could that be?
But it was Peters. Who do you think calls first? Isn't it Quinn?
Great question. Maybe somebody is calling him to pick up maybe our phones are ringing now.
I'm sure someone's calling Peters.
Is Howie just asking how their night is?
Because it's gonna be Dan Quinn.
Now it did look like in that shot we saw, it did look like there was a media guy with a camera right up to Peter's face. So to me, what that means, they wouldn't necessarily be filming that if that was a trade call. I think
Fair.
that's a call to a prospect, to a draftee.
That's
And I
fair.
think that I would expect our, pick to be in soon. Hopefully, we're under 3 minutes now. So, uh, this is the make or break time right now.
That's good media in person insight with the camera thing. Because you're totally right.
Hey man, this is the life of a communications professional. Ladies and gentlemen, the pick is in.
Okay.
The pick is in.
And obviously, this is a moment which I'm happy that we are going
Here
to
we go.
have
Here we go.
draft about
War
it, as
room.
this is the turning point of our franchise. This is really going to sort of bring us into a new era of football here in DC, no matter who is picked. And you can't be more happy than to have the face of your franchise being taken before you tonight.
All right, guys. Dan Quinn is dressed in the all black suit with no tie, maybe possibly a turtleneck. That was an interesting look for our head coach there. Um, what does that say? What do you think that says about the quality of player we're about to bring it? No, I mean, uh,
I
the
do
pick
think
is
it
in.
is.
I'm excited, man. There's a lot to. We sadly didn't get a great angle of that war room. It was kind of like to the
No.
side. Like I wish we would have gotten everybody. Like the Bears
Saw
had a
May
great setup.
They did. We saw Mayhew. Oh, that looked like a weird like like classroom almost, but yeah, that you saw Martin Mayhew there, you saw Doug in there, you saw obviously Quinn and
Peters,
Peters. I'm sure Marty Herney was in that room as well. I'm sure maybe even the other guy they brought on, I forget his name. All right.
they just showed some Commanders fans. One of them had an Adam We Trust with Peters' face on it. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go.
There you have it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the selection is Jaden Daniels from LSU.
We
As
telegraphed
many
that.
of us thought, we've got our guy. We're gonna be all in. I'm all in. It was always gonna be Jaden Daniels. Rookie of the year, lock it in right now.
I sure hope so. I'm happy about this. I mean, I think this is what everyone was anticipating, right? But overall, I mean, if we're getting the guy that just won the Heisman, you really can't complain with that. A guy that honestly, in a lot of ways, I think is could have been the first overall pick, and others have said that as well. You see it. You see the stat on the screen right now. Only quarterback in FBS history with 12,000 plus passing yards and 3,000 plus rushing yards. So he's just a dual threat athlete that hopefully we can build around. He looks happy, so that's always good. He looks like he's very excited to be our pick.
I think it's also worth noting that backup quarterback Marcus Mariota has relatively similar skill set to Jaden Daniels, which can be an advantage if the worst happens and there's an injury, or even just the practice squad players or the number twos during training camp. They get to run a very similar offense with a very similar quarterback too, which can be good for developing those guys and having them plug into the first team easily.
Well, Brass, let's also not forget that Marcus Mariota himself was a second overall pick about 10 years ago. And I think that's really going to be a big thing for Jaden Daniels, is sort of understanding like, hey, look, I came to the NFL. I was working very well as a mobile guy, but I needed to learn this in order to succeed. Marcus Mariota is a guy that will be able to tell Jaden Daniels, just honest facts about his career, hopefully help him develop quicker than any other quarterback in the rest of this draft, especially given, like you said, their similar skill sets and their similar condition of being. Now, I think the one interesting thing here with Jaden Daniels that you do have to consider is that, I don't think there's any safety net here for him to be caught. I mean, last year you have Jacoby Brissett behind Sam Howell for most of the year. You have, the Taylor Heineke's of the world behind the Dwayne Haskins. So I think there's an interesting thing to be said here about him not having a safety net and probably going to be thrown out there week one.
He's definitely going out there week one. I mean, he's brought in here nowadays first round picks, especially the quarterback position, they're meant to come in and play. Um, Now, ideally, wouldn't it be nice to have him sit behind someone for a year that's already established if we had, a guy like an Aaron Rodgers, right, or something like that, but we don't, and this franchise is also starved for success. And so I think what the staff did, they went out and got a guy who's ready to come in, plug in and play now. And I think Jaden Daniels is that guy given his experience, how many games he's played, in the toughest division in college football. So um, yeah, I'm excited. I think this is the right pick. Just hope that he's got the cast around him to make it happen.
And obviously, one of the big things that you have to consider here is Jaden Daniels wearing that Carolina blue, quite similar to an institution within Bethesda, Maryland, that we are quite familiar with. I think that might be a good sign, towards his future career with the Commanders here. That might be, the draft gods telling us that we found the one.
You just give a high school reference there?
Oh yeah, Walt Whitman, baby, Carolina blue and black, white accents.
Love it. And the pick is in for the
Ooh,
Patriots.
look at that graphic.
Now,
that
this
Commanders first round QBs, common draft era since 1967. Heath Schuler, Patrick Ramsey, Jason Campbell, RG3, Dwayne Haskins, and now Jaden Daniels. That isn't exactly an illustrious group to be joining. Some success from some guys at some points there, but overall,
flashes in the
That's why
pan.
there's so many of them.
Jay Campbell, man, we had a couple fun years with a fun cast.
certainly
do-
fun is definitely a word.
I think
One
fun
word
is
that
the
could
word.
be used to describe.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
Right.
I did notice something interesting during this draft coverage by the NFL Network here, and maybe you guys might not have known this, but in his freshman year, Jaden Daniels actually was throwing the ball at Arizona State to Brandon Ayuk, a man who is on the trade report, as far as we can tell, looking for big money. And honestly, if he felt good with Jaden Daniels at ASU, as he obviously did enough to get drafted in the second round, I believe, or maybe even the early first. What was he drafted?
He was
But
first.
anyways, wouldn't it be interesting if we were to get a guy like Brandon Ayuk on our team to really bolster that receiving core, maybe make up for that tight end room that we can all agree is quite lacking, um, and sort of bring an energy back to DC that we haven't had since maybe the RG3 years.
Just looked it up. He was pick number 25 in 2020.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just had our third quarterback picked in a row. It is Drake May out of UNC going to the New England Patriots. This is going to be a guy that I think us as Commanders fans are going to have our eye on. Both of these guys' careers, there was a question of who was one, who was two. Some even thought JJ McCarthy might be the spot here or over May, but nonetheless, we have a draft where three quarterbacks have been picked in a row. Honestly, I can't tell you the last time that happened.
Can we make it 4? Do
I
you think
can
it's
tell
gonna be
you the
4?
last time that happened. The last time three quarterbacks were taken, it was Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson. And of course, Clark, can you name that third quarterback from that draft?
Would that have been the gentleman who played against the Butler Bulldogs, Trey Lance?
That would indeed be Trey Lance, current Cowboys quarterback, I believe. Unless something weird was to happen in free agency. But maybe a guy that you see getting a few more looks over there in Dallas, if they start to try and look away from a poorly playing Dak as he has for the past few years.
Do y'all think that Minnesota and the Giants are fighting for the Arizona line right now to get a little on the phone with the GM?
I would be shocked if those phones weren't ringing right now, especially after May was the pick here. I don't know that everybody necessarily thought that New England was guaranteed gonna take a QB, but they did. And I think not only is Arizona's phone ringing, Chargers as well has to be ringing. Um, Seemingly neither of those teams need a quarterback, but you know, Let's also not forget you got still a guy like Marvin Harrison on the board, who many thought would be a top 3 pick, but no, seemingly New England has their guy.
I think this pick did make sense for the Patriots. I mean, you have Mac Jones going to the Jaguars this offseason through trade. You have a new head coach in Gerard Mayo stepping into a role that he has never fulfilled in his entire life up until this point. And you could obviously see him trying to find a guy to go with that he would have as his guy who will take the team through the next 3 to 5 years and determine whether or not Gerard Mayo gets a second contract. And will determine whether the Patriots return to relevancy in the AFC East. I think this Arizona Cardinals pick is very interesting. Obviously, last year they take Paris Johnson, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, a rather highly touted recruit. I believe he was taken at the number 6 spot. They're drafting 4th here, so you can tell that pick didn't make a lot of difference for them. But obviously, the question here is: does it seem chalk that this is going to be Marvin Harrison if they do not trade out of the pick here?
Feels that way.
I mean, I'd say so. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top player in this draft. I think he's definitely a generational talent. He's been around success in the NFL with his dad having a prolific career with the Colts, and honestly, soon might even have his dad's number retired in that stadium. I think that's someone that every team wants on their roster, and I think it has to be a really good trade if you're not taking him right here.
Yeah, I would agree. And not only for everything you just said, well, also the pick is in for me for this Cardinals team right now. And they were just saying that 20 years ago and 1 day removed was when they drafted one Larry Fitzgerald. So it would be quite poetic if Maserati Marv is the guy taken off the board here.
I absolutely believe that he's probably going to be the guy here. I think that, losing Hollywood Brown last year to the Ravens obviously hurt them. And then now Hollywood obviously being on the Chiefs. I think, they're trying to find their footing, get back to playing competitive football out in the NFC West and really sort of, make their footprint known in the league. However, we've talked about it, and it was sort of talked about amongst other draft pundits that, this could very easily be a draft where we see 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 15. Now, obviously, I think that's a little bit high for some of the guys who are later in this draft, like Michael Penix and Bo Nix. I think those are guys that you see slide down to the late one, more likely for early to middle of the second round. But obviously, with the way it's trending right now, I mean, you have half of the 6 already taken in the first 3 picks. You have a few QB needy teams coming up here, possibly with maybe the Vikings trying to trade up into a higher spot, and obviously a team like the New York Giants, maybe not feeling as secure in Daniel Jones as they were when they gave him the massive extension that he's currently on. Um, I think that there's a lot of ways that this can go. I think another interesting storyline that's been talked about is the Chargers potentially going after JJ McCarthy, of course, having his college head coach recently hired. And JJ McCarthy really being touted by this guy as one of the best quarterbacks in the draft. So I think that's another interesting place to look. Although you would say they already have their franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert, maybe not feeling so secure. And also, the Chargers needing a lot of pieces in order for that team to seem as competitive as they have been the past 2 years. So very interesting to see what happens here in the next few picks. I think you have to keep your eye on the teams like Tennessee and Atlanta, who might be, looking to trade back if some of these quarterbacks start slipping and teams start to feel a bit antsy about who might be taking who. Obviously, Atlanta, a team that recently signed our former quarterback and Kirk Cousins, to a rather large deal. His agent, obviously one of the ultimate robbers in NFL history when it comes to getting amazing contracts for his clients. Cardinals selection was also made just now.
And it was indeed Maserati Marvin Harrison Jr. There were some questions about him in the pre-draft, but not many, because if you watch any of this guy's games, I mean, he was unbelievable. He was a generational talent. He is a generational talent, and it's going to be a very, very dangerous weapon for Kyler Murray. I think this guy's going to come in immediately, be like 1,000-yard, big touchdown, getter for this team. And the little fact about Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, storybook stuff.
Chargers pick here will be interesting to see if they trade or not. I kind of have a bold theory that their guy right here is O'Dunes. I think that's a receiver that historically, big body that they really like. I don't think you take him at 5 though. I think trying to trade here with maybe the Minnesota Vikings, trying to jump the Giants for a quarterback, and then trying to pick O'Dunes at around 11. I think that would be the play the Chargers try to make here.
Obviously, the Chargers needing some receiver help. A guy like Malik Neighbors, maybe the number 1 wide receiver prospect in any other draft besides this one. Obviously, rough to be in the same draft as Marvin Harrison Jr., a guy who, obviously since he started at Ohio State, had talks about making it to the NFL and obviously outperforming even his expectations at Ohio State, sort of making it a question about whether or not he would jump into that top 3. Obviously, we don't see that happen off of the teams that have a much larger need at quarterback, sort of going for their guys first. But it is interesting here because you might be seeing Malik Neighbors here taken by both the Chargers, who lost Keenan Allen in the offseason, who currently only see who I also believe they lost Michael Williams in the offseason. Mike Williams in the offseason. So they will be needing some
did.
receiver help, as Quentin Johnston has clearly proven to not be the guy there. At least in his rookie season, maybe he can get some better gloves and sort of turn that around as we move on, throughout his career here. But Malik Neighbors, definitely a guy who I think we should be watching out as coming off the board here in the next 2 picks.
I think if he ends up going to the Giants, I think it's gonna be a real tough time in the NFC East, even with Daniel Jones throwing the ball. I mean, he is just
Yeah, I guess when will we see the first defensive guy come off the board here?
Yeah, and that does seem to be the question of the draft. I think the obvious answer is wherever Dallas Turner out of Alabama will be taken, a guy who was a really big disruptor for that Alabama team throughout their multiple playoff runs during his time there. Really a sort of a guy who you might even comp out to a Micah Parsons type, being that sort of speedy outside prototypical linebacker that you want in the modern NFL. And obviously, that's sort of a big ceiling to put on the guy, and maybe a bit of a lofty title, considering what a guy like Micah Parsons does for defense. But I truly believe that he could get to that sort of point in his career. And I think the interesting question will be, when do we see someone like an offensive lineman, or not necessarily a skill position, taken as a whole.
I think this pick could be the one where you see that happening. They did pick, in the last several years, Rashawn Slater, the Chargers did, and he's been a very solid tackle for them. But knowing Harbaugh, I feel like he's going to want to build up that offensive line, and they're going to want to be able to run the football. So I wouldn't be shocked to see, a Joe Alt or an Olu Fashanu or someone like that being the pick here for the Chargers.
I'm gonna stay strong and say they don't pick here and they trade back.
They are taking a while.
Spicy take from Jay Brass here. We're gonna see if it comes through. They are taking a while on the clock here. We are about 2 minutes to go with this pick.
I think kind of regardless how these 2 picks go, I do think Tennessee will be the first non-skill position team to draft this year. I think they'll either go for Joe Alt or go with even Dallas Turner and start building up the edge there.
And Tennessee, a team that did go offensive line last year with Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern, a guy who you didn't really hear much of, but that's mainly because that Tennessee team wasn't necessarily all that touted, as I believe Brassard has some news for us on what this pick might have been. Brassard.
Yeah, I was dead wrong. The pick is in. So Chargers are not trading the number 5 overall pick.
And that is
Hey,
big
it's a
news.
good theory.
It
That was
absolutely
fun.
was.
That was fun
Good
while it
theory.
lasted there for about 3 minutes, but nonetheless, the Chargers pick is in fact in. Will it be a Doomsday as you alluded to? I think they're taking an offensive lineman, but
Ooh, I
uh,
hope not.
we'll see.
Save
I
more
hope
for
not as
us.
well. I
Run
I would
first.
like to have him keep going down the draft board for sure.
Yeah, slide those big dogs our way.
I think definitely for the Eagles too. The more quarterbacks taken early, the better.
Well, and I think the other big question here is, I think there was a lot of teams that were projected to maybe be moving out of these spots that are getting drafted right now. And it seems like the Chargers were obviously secure in taking their guy. Maybe they were looking for a trade like you suggested, Brassard, with the amount of time they took to get the pick in. However, it seems like they seem to like the guy. They were going to get more than what the other teams might have been offering. So you're gonna be curious to see what they felt was like an untradeable asset for them to give up on. Now I think the interesting thing here is that if you see them take a quarterback, which it's completely possible, how quickly do you see them trade back up using that Justin Herbert trade chip that you have now to sort of use in this first round?
If they do take JJ McCarthy here, do the Commanders have a little bit of buyer's remorse with Jaden Daniels and wish they could plug in Justin Herbert right away into their offense?
It's a valid question.
I don't know that I buy all of this talk that Herbert was maybe going to be on the move. That is, I mean, listen, I would have taken it nonetheless, but Jaden Daniels is that guy. You know what? Jaden Daniels isn't that guy. Jaden Daniels is my guy.
Sounds like you sipped that
Our
Kool-Aid.
guy.
And Clark is correct. It is a Joe Alt getting taken 5th overall by the Chargers. That's one
Ab-
for Clark tonight.
Absolutely massive for the Chargers, and I think that this is a good pick for them, sort of securing that offensive lineman for the
Like, does
future.
he know yet?
He doesn't look very happy, and yeah, he is.
I don't think he knows.
I'm not sure he knows either.
Wait,
Yeah,
his dad.
they
Oh, his dad. I didn't know his dad was in the NFL.
John Olt, number
Other
21
lineage.
overall pick, 1984. Who could forget?
Must have missed that one.
Big question now is, do the Giants softly move on from Daniel Jones here? Have they invested too much to take a quarterback right now? And do they build up Daniel Jones's options and maybe take Malik Neighbors here?
Well, it's interesting because I think you see Malik Neighbors is clearly a guy who isn't seeming to be happy with the way that he's sliding down the draft board. I mean, they showed him in the green room not too long ago for me, and looking very, very serious, sort of maybe even a bit unhappy, depending on how much you want to read into his body language there. But I think this is going to be an interesting pick for the Giants because you have a guy like Brock Bowers, who's the number one tight end in there. Maybe you think about doing that to kind of alleviate some of that pressure off Daniel Jones, and you give up on this Waller experiment that you tried last year. Maybe you do go with that receiver, but I think one guy who's really going to be able to give us a good insight on this previous draft pick, Joe Alt, is of course Jacob Shetterly, Notre Dame fan here. Joe Alt going to the Chargers. Kind of talk about what he might be doing for that team. Do you see him as sort of a plug and play guy that might be able to make a Pro Bowl like we've seen so many of these Notre Dame offensive linemen do in their first year? Where do you see the sky for Joe Alt being?
Yeah, like he's one of a great line of Notre Dame offensive linemen over the past, guess now, decade plus. He'll start for them week one. He'll start for them all year, and I imagine he'll be, like you said, an all-pro type left tackle for them. I like who better to protect Justin Herbert, I think, is a great pick.
Ladies and gentlemen, the New York Giants pick is in at number 6. This is a big
Oh.
pick for everyone in here. Of course, the one
Yeah.
NFC East team not represented is the New York Giants.
Yeah. Any insight? Any
Hello?
last minute insight from Bram Clark on what he thought this was going to be?
Bram did send me a message. He's unfortunately still at work. He sends his best regards. He didn't let me know as what he was thinking, but he's certainly got his eyes peeled for what's about to happen here in the next few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, who
Yes.
knows? I don't think they're going to take a quarterback here, right? Because didn't they pick up? Did they or did they not pick up the
I have
fifth
official
year?
statement from Bram.
Okay.
I have official statement from Bram. He is hoping it is Malik Neighbors from LSU, the wide receiver. He says, quote, "I cannot do JJ." So we're going to see if he's going to be doing JJ or not. They're, in fact, showing him smiling right now on my TV.
He looks like he just got a phone call. I don't know.
Like he's wearing lipstick.
Not my QB.
And
I
you know,
think-
it's
I think as NFC East fans, I think them taking JJ McCarthy here is a win for the other 3 teams. I think that's them folding on where their franchise is.
Malik Neighbors looks like he just got a call with that smile.
He
got a
does
call.
look rather
Giants got
happy right
Miles.
now. Again,
I mean-
a very important pick for this class. Tom, sorry.
this Giants team, if they take JJ McCarthy, does it not feel like when they drafted Daniel Jones to be sort of Eli Manning 2.0, is JJ McCarthy supposed to be the Daniel Jones 2.0 in some ways? I think that there's an interesting connection to be made there between the play styles, as Brass, I believe, has some big news for us.
I guess we'll never know if he's Daniel Jones too, because they did draft Malik Neighbors and they are all in on Danny Dingus for at least the next 2 years.
Good. That's
Dangerous
what we want.
cornerbacks.
Wow.
Though dangerous.
And really securing their their wide receiver position. And really, this wide receiver position for the New York Giants has been a bit of a question mark. Obviously, paying Kenny Galladay not too long ago into one of maybe the worst free agent wide receiver contracts of the past 5 years. You have a guy like Sterling Shepard, who was on that team all the way back to when Odell was still playing for them, being someone who was sort of touted as maybe being that number 2 guy for them. Malik Neighbors obviously is going to come into a very positive scenario for him. Another LSU receiver going to the Giants. Who knows what sort of splash he could make in the NFC East? Obviously, a scary proposition for all of our secondaries. But you got to be interested in seeing what happens here with the scheming of Brian Dable, along with a new LSU shiny tool for that Giants tool case to have.
Is eerily similar to OBJ. Very eerily similar.
I'm jealous of these last 2 picks. I would have loved to pair up with Malik Neighbors with Jaden Daniels, and I would have loved a stud protecting him like Joe Alt. So I guess I knew there was a lot of talent in this draft, but wow, there's a lot that I would like to. I was kind of opposed of us jumping back into the first, but maybe it's something we do.
Tom, was it you that said that the Chargers were going to take Neighbors?
I thought that there was a chance that they go for Malik Neighbors, especially after they see Marvin Harrison come off the board. I felt like their receiving room definitely doesn't have the depth necessary, but I feel like Joe Alt was probably the correct pick in terms of the long-term development of this team into, what they believe they can be, which is a contender with Justin Herbert, if they can just retool that offense a bit and maybe give a new look for the NFL.
Official statement from Bram post pick selection. Drew Lock just got a true number 1 wide receiver.
Good for Drew. Good for Drew.
So
I think-
seemingly the Giants nation, they may have turned their backs on DJ.
I think we might see the first defensive player taken here with Tennessee after Joe Alt going off the board. I think there's a chance they try to go for an edge rusher here.
That would certainly be an interesting turn of events, as I think that you might be right here. Obviously, the only real big offensive weapon that's still left on the board, besides Brock Bowers at tight end, is Rome Odunze. And this is a team that has a young quarterback in Will Levis that they might be trying to put some sort of draft, some stock into. Maybe put him in the best position to succeed before giving him the boot out the door if he doesn't end up turning things around. So it would be interesting if they go for a defensive player here. You have a rather strong defense, although you do have a new coach, as Mike Vrabel is no longer in Tennessee. It's interesting to see what this new regime will do here, as most of the new regimes so far seem to have gone for quarterbacks. Uh, However, who's to say that this Tennessee pick isn't going to be a guy like Dallas Turner? That would make a big difference here for the Tennessee Titans as we look forward to next season. I do think there might be something to be said about Dallas Turner possibly going to Atlanta, as it seems to me that Atlanta is doomed to have, amazing draft talent that doesn't work out, and Dallas Turner being the best defensive player on the board would sort of fit that stereotypical Atlanta Falcons pick that we've seen these past few years.
I feel
I'm
like
ex-
that's what a lot of the mocks had going was Dallas Turner as the first defensive player off the board at 8. It'll be interesting to see if that holds true now as the Tennessee Titans pick at number 7 is in.
Yeah, I cannot imagine he gets past 8. I think he's definitely a top 10 pick. And how many years in a row can Atlanta draft a skill position player? Like that streak's got to end. I think it might be this year.
Yeah, they got new faces in the building. Um, year after year, wasted talent seemingly on their offense. Arthur Smith is no longer in the building, so that will be interesting to see if they finally don't take a skill position guy.
And I'm curious if you guys know this. Do are any of you guys aware who the highest ranked prospect out of Georgia is? As Brass might be needing to take a look at who that guy is to kind of get a feel for what his team will be going for this year in the draft.
I gotta imagine it's Mims, right? Who I think is 100% on high on the Eagles draft board.
Amarius
That
Mims is a large individual. Indeed, he's a very large individual, and the Eagles seem to like taking large individuals that went to the University of Georgia.
No, I think the Denver Broncos might be a team looking to trade back. And I think Mims and also Latham from Alabama are two guys the Eagles would absolutely love to add, with the expectation that Lane Johnson is probably going to call it a career in the next couple of years. I think they want to make that pick now, especially in such a prolific tackle draft. And Broncos are looking to build some capital. Eagles have 2 second-round picks. I think they'd be willing to move one of those. So we could see Philly on the board in not too long here.
And do you think really the urgency for the Eagles that you and many of the other Eagles fans that I've talked to is coming from sort of that close Super Bowl run? Obviously, I had to go back and look at it, a 38-35 loss to the Chiefs. There was a lot of people saying that this Eagles team was going to be back in the championship game this year. Obviously, didn't seem to work out that way. But this Eagles team, do you think they're kind of pushing for a higher draft pick, trying to get a more win now approach, kind of have one more young guy to develop with the rest of the young guys they've already taken?
Yeah, I'd really say it's the exact opposite. I think if you're trying to win now, if you're the Eagles, I think you try to add a wide receiver 3. You try to trade up for like a Brock Bowers and get a Dallas Goedert replacement. It's the same age that they drafted Goddard for when Ertz came 28, and also the same thing when Ertz was drafted. Selleck was turning 28. Or I think you take a cornerback, but Howie really looks at this draft and he looks at this as we're going to take a player for the next 4 years. It's a 4-year commitment that he's looking at right now. And I think you're going to look down low for this year with Jason Kelce just retiring, having a big question mark of who's going to play at right guard, and kind of staring Lane Johnson's retirement in the face. I think you're planning for the next 4 years and securing a strong offensive line right now and continuing that tradition in Philadelphia.
They can't argue with that. I mean, I think That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, y'all have kind of take pride in that offensive line of yours. It's what's allowed you all to been able to do the signature brotherly shove, right? And kind of where that all started, right? So I would not be surprised if that's the route that y'all go. I guess that makes the most sense.
I think it is interesting to note here that the Eagles haven't really had sort of a premier first round offensive lineman in a while. Obviously, Brass once again having some big news for us as he seems to be the most up to date on draft. Brass, what do you see?
I just got some great Wi-Fi, you know. But I think a big Eagle target here, J.C. Latham, going to the Tennessee Titans, 7th overall. They get a huge lineman to protect their future quarterback in Will Levis, and their new running back to run behind in Tony Pollard, from former Cowboy.
JC Latham, really a guy that, I don't think many mock drafts had him necessarily going this high. I certainly don't remember seeing any of note that really had him going. Doubling down on offensive tackle 2 years in a row here for the Tennessee Titans. Um, it's an interesting thing. They got rid of Derrick Henry, and now they start building up this offensive line. You got to wonder what the idea is here. Are you trying to build around Will Levis? Are you trying to put the pieces in place for a guy to replace Will Levis in a few years? Are you just trying to draft who the best player on your board was? I mean, it's got to be a big question here about what they're going to do now that they've used most of the high draft capital on the offensive line.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily the guy that many thought, was going to be kind of the tackle number two. I did see some mocks with him going up to as high as 5 as the first guy I picked. But I feel like a lot of people thought that this, number two would maybe be Fashanu from Penn State. Um, if Atlanta Falcons pick is in and sitting at number 9, Fashanu actually would be an interesting pick for that Bears team, especially considering that he is the high school teammate of their new quarterback.
And I think part of it making him kind of slide up the draft board to number 7 is you just can't teach size. And maybe he needs a little bit more polishing and to develop, but Tennessee kind of has a history of some pretty strong run game and strong linemen. I think he'll be able to thrive there. And if you don't need him to kind of plug in right away, I don't think the Tennessee Titans think it's a Super Bowl year. I don't they really think if they see themselves the best team in the division right now. They're in a really tough, really, really tough division. And I think they're focusing on building the foundation early instead of going for maybe those skill position players early.
I got a question. Who do you guys think is going to be the next quarterback taken off the board here, and by who?
I think if I had to give you my guess, I see the Minnesota Vikings. They were a team tabbed to be trading up kind of for a long time now. Many thought Drake May would be a guy they'd be looking to go after, but obviously that didn't happen. New England stayed put. So they pick at 11 after the Jets. So I think it's entirely possible that a quarterback gets taken. And if I had to guess, I'd assume McCarthy. Um, but again, this is the NFL draft, and you got to expect the unexpected.
I'd buy a ticket on that train that Clark's conducting over there. I'll hop on that.
And I think an interesting pick here could easily be Michael Penix out of Washington. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that has a somewhat proud history of African American quarterbacks in their franchise. And I think that if there's a guy that resembles Warren Moon in this draft, it might be Michael Penix coming out of Washington as well. Multiple injuries, obviously sort of came back and came to this Washington Huskies team and brought them to their first, I believe, college football championship game since maybe even the 70s or maybe their first in their school history. It might be interesting to see if the Minnesota Vikings find a guy like that interesting, especially considering he's spent a lot of time in college and he's really developed as a player not only throughout that experience, but he's going to be able to develop even into a better player with the pro coaching that he'll be able to get with whatever his new team may be.
What do we think
I
about
guess
this Atlanta
whoever-
Falcons draft room for those
Yeah,
that are watching right
there
now?
was just someone dipping. One of the guys was dipping. Saw that.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic in the scout, in the war room. Guys putting it on the line, doing what you got to do to get the job done. Maybe it's
Throwing a
packing a lip.
chaw. Yeah,
Maybe
throwing in
maybe
a
it's
big
thrown a
chaw.
yeah, maybe it's thrown in a chaw, maybe it's packing a lip. Nonetheless, the Dirty Birds of Atlanta have their pick. Any last thoughts? I think I'm going Dallas Turner here, but what do we think?
Yet again, I'm hopping on your bandwagon, Clark. I'm going Dallas Turner too.
Let's go.
Roger is walking to the stage.
Also, Roger with the a couple buttons undone from his shirt underneath there. That is interesting.
Michael Penix
Whoa.
Jr. Another lefty quarterback taken by Atlanta.
Wait, what?
Maybe the
Whoa.
first and pick? That is crazy.
This is our first shock for sure. No one had this coming. No one saw this coming
They were
at
just
all.
showing him a lot, so
Why did
Oh
they-
my
if he's
goodness.
surprised. He's surprised.
Damn.
Why did they take Kirk Cousins then?
Why'd they pay Kirk?
They just paid Kirk a lot of money.
Wow.
So here's what that tells me then. They like what they see in Penix and they want him to like sit behind Kirk for at least 2 years and develop more.
It's also interesting too because you see a team with a new head coach once again reaching for a quarterback who they clearly had a belief in taking. Obviously, no one saw him going this high. I sort of threw him in for one of the Minnesota Vikings options just because you need to think about what the other options would be. And I don't think any of us saw him going before Dallas Turner. And really, the Chicago Bears have an opportunity to get maybe the best defensive player in the draft, as well as the best offensive player in the draft, pulling something similar to what the Houston Texans did last year
It's
with the
been
number 2 and 3 pick.
been 2 years in a row that the offensive and defensive rookie of the year have been on the same team, right? First with the Jets and then last year with the Texans.
That is correct.
So the last 4 drafts for the Atlanta Falcons, 2021, Kyle Pitts, number 4 overall pick. 2022, Drake London, number 8 overall pick. 2023, Bijan Robinson, number 8 overall pick. And 2024, Michael Penix, number 8 overall. Remember when we were saying, wouldn't it be insane if they drafted another skill position offensive player? Well, here we are,
The
folks.
quarterback.
I don't see Penix as
Psychos.
a guy you can draft and have him sit behind Kirk Cousins for 2 years, though. I mean, he's already 24 years old. So if we're taking that scenario Chris laid out, he's going to be 26 years old by the time he's a starting
Fair.
quarterback.
That's
I
fair.
think
Well-
he's much more a plug and play kind of guy.
You also have to consider the fact that Kirk Cousins has had an injury-riddled past few years. Obviously, his tenure with the Vikings not necessarily as smooth sailing as other sort of quarterback tenures during that time. So you might be seeing Michael Penix play a lot earlier than you think. I mean, obviously, the traditional thought of, hey, let's put him behind Kirk and let him develop might be a little bit foolish with an older guy like you say, Brassard, but they obviously seem to believe that he's a guy who's going to develop into something for them when you invest an 8th overall pick into him. So, I'm as shocked as the rest of you guys with this one.
I have to think they tried to trade down, but couldn't get close enough where they think he'd still be there. Well, I gotta imagine. I think that's a bit of a reach at 8. I think they could have gotten better talent.
I'm just trying to understand they signed Kirk to a 4-year deal. There was the whole thing, there was tampering with him. They wanted him. Like they just got in trouble for talking to him prematurely. There's the whole thing with his family moving down there. His wife is from Georgia. And then they go ahead and draft this quarterback who's 24 at the 8th overall pick. I just am not understanding this. Not to say I don't like Penix. He was pretty great with Washington this past year. And, was very fun to watch throwing the football. But man, that I think will be the most talked about pick from this entire first round.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And yeah, I'm with you. I really don't see the logic there too. I was trying to paint a picture. Maybe they do want a guy to sit, but I didn't realize he was that old already, I guess, in terms of, being a rookie, right? So that really is a head scratcher. Let's see who the Bears take here.
We do not have a defensive
Okay.
player taken yet in this draft, and we have
Another
Leo
receiver.
Jones going to the Bears.
Penix is, I guess, guy, right?
Yeah. And I guess now Caleb Williams guy with Keenan
Yeah.
Allen and DJ Moore.
That is going to be a scary looking offense if that all pans out. And before they actually show this on the broadcast, I have some breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. The Minnesota Vikings have traded up one spot here to number 10 with the Jets.
Oh, wow. That means they thought that the Jets were going to take McCarthy, right?
That's got to be the thought. I mean, they just saw another quarterback fly off the board. Minnesota might
That
be
scared
freaking
them.
out.
They panicked.
Yep.
Panic trade up.
I wonder if the
panic
leaders
traded
were calling
one-
too.
Panic trade one spot up as well.
I wonder
Well,
what they
you
did
do
for
have
that.
you have to ask what you think the New York Jets were getting. I mean, a lot of mock drafts had the Jets taking Brock Bowers tight end, and maybe the Jets were sort of realizing the position they were in with the QBs that seemed to slide down the board. But obviously, you see a grab with Michael Penix, and Minnesota did definitely get a little jumpy and sort of move up here a little prematurely. But possibly a team like Denver or Las Vegas was trying to get that same pick, with the Jets feeling confident that they could get Brock Bowers even later in the draft than the 10th overall pick. So quite interesting to see the slide here for Brock Bowers. And an interesting thing is that we've talked about teams that could move up and sort of make a grab at someone. I mean, the Eagles could easily get Fashanu here if they were to move into the next 5 or 6 picks. A Penn State guy, we talked about it before the draft, Brass, but I think that might be the sort of offensive tackle replacement for, Lane Johnson that you were talking about.
I think it's definitely a guy the Eagles like, but especially when it comes to like Lane Johnson replacement, I really think they're looking for a big size guy, and Mims is still on the board too. I think that might be a guy the Eagles really try to target, and I think that might be Howie's number 1 or number 2 guy he's looking at tonight.
And certainly will be an interesting thing to look out for here. But obviously Minnesota trading up. So do we all agree this is probably for J.J. McCarthy? I mean, there's no other reason for you to be making a move this serious unless you have a guy that you think is going to be taken off the board, with the next pick. I mean, it's curious to see who they felt so secure that they wanted to trade up for.
Here's a stat I would love to know the answer to. When was the last time we had a top 10 with 0 defensive players being selected? Because it's looking like that may be the case. Of course, depending on what happens with this Minnesota pick, but if they traded up, in all likelihood, this has to be a quarterback.
It could be a first.
Got to be JJ.
Could be a first, Clark. I don't know. But that is a lot of picks to go in a row, all on the offensive side, all things considered. Wow, yeah, honestly, this has been an exciting kind of first 10 picks here.
And I think this might be an exciting pick for J.J. McCarthy, because I think if you're a quarterback in this draft class, I don't think there's a better place to go than Minnesota. You have 2 great receivers. You have a coach who has a good history with quarterbacks. They did a fantastic job with Josh Dobbs last year, who was able to walk on the team and perform at a high level. And you have a really good running back in Aaron Jones, too. I think this is a great spot to be if you're starting your career.
Yeah,
Yep.
and regardless, this will be the first draft since at least 2019 and probably even earlier where 2 players defensively won't be taken in the top 10, let alone 1 player. So this is certainly going to be a draft that we talk about for a while. And really the question here is, was the defense really so weak that the offensive guys were getting taken more highly, or is it more that people just wanted their guy on the offensive side of the ball and felt like they had to reach for them and not go for maybe the safer picks in the defense? And an even bigger question will obviously be that Michael Penix pick. I mean, that is absurd for Atlanta to go after Michael Penix with the amount of guys defensively and offensively you could have gotten off the board there, especially with that Kirk contract. But I think the question here has to be what team is really likely to take a defensive guy here in the next 5 picks. And I honestly think you might not even see it come until maybe even the Raiders or Indianapolis picks, because New Orleans got Brian Breesy last year, and he seemed to pan out quite well for them.
I think maybe if the Broncos stay and pick, they take either Byron Murphy or maybe the first cornerback out off the board. But after that, yeah, I think maybe the Colts would be the first team to look for defense. But even then, there's been a lot of rumors that the Colts might try to take a receiver too. Not fully believing in Alex Pierce and trying to find another guy outside to pair with Michael Pittman as we move to more of a 2-receiver league.
And I would be remiss really fast, unrelated to what you said there, Brass, but I would agree with that. Um, of course, with the mention of Brian Bresee, famously, rec league basketball opponent of Tom back in the day.
Yeah, and he showed me why he was, a first round pick in the NFL. I mean, 6'5", 300 pounds. He could dunk quite easily. In fact, threw 2 self oops in that game, got double technicals as you could not dunk in the rec league. He didn't care. He was doing pretty good all day. I hit my shots here and there, but he was a special guy. I think that it's an interesting conversation to have about what the next defensive guy really ends up being coming off the board, because I think we all think Dallas Turner, but with the way this draft is going, there's a good chance this might be a defensive tackle or one of the big boys up front. As none of these teams really are too linebacker needy as far as I'm aware.
Vikings draft room doesn't look as hyped, so I don't know what went wrong there. They're probably all just like, shit, we just had to like panic and draft up for this.
Basically, yeah. You're like, oh shit. Well,
They're not celebrating.
what did they give up? That's what I want to know.
I know. Let's hear it. I hope, I feel like if it was just a 7th or a 6th.
I found it. I have
what is
found
it?
it. Vikings traded number 11 overall, a 4th round pick, and a 5th round pick to the Jets in exchange for number 10 and pick
Ooh.
number 203. So they gave up a 4th and a 5th to
And
move
they
up to
got
this
that.
one spot.
And then they got what else? It says they
And they
got.
got they got the 10th pick, and they got pick number 203.
I wonder what round that is.
It's that would be like 5th
The
round,
6th
maybe.
round? 5th or 6th?
Yeah, 5th to 6th round.
If it's for JJ, I guess I get it because they freaked out when Penix went off the board like that.
I wonder if maybe even like the Jets called and it's like, hey, Vikings or Raiders are trying to trade for this pick right now. What do you have?
Oh, I'm sure they could have pulled that card on him, and they would have been, honestly at the mercy.
And many outlets reporting right now that JJ McCarthy will be the pick for the Vikings. Obviously, this is a huge pick for them. This is the guy who they clearly thought was going to be their franchise QB. Obviously, we know some Vikings fans, and I'm curious because, we obviously knew they wanted Drake May, but JJ McCarthy is a whole nother guy. Really saw a lot of criticism going into this draft, maybe unfair, the amount, just because, it did seem like people kept piling on him about, not being the quarterback prospect that people are saying and being Mr. Handoff in college and kind of relying on that Michigan run game that kind of brought them to the national championship that they won. But, interesting pick here for the Vikings. This is a guy who I don't think anyone had as a guy who was a day one starter. And it looks like with this pick, you're making him your day one starter, especially given Kirk Cousins leaving the building. I mean, just crazy to see that happen. I mean, there's been a lot of interesting things that have happened in this draft already, and we haven't even got out of the top 10 just yet, or we just did.
JJ McCarthy, folks, is your pick for the Vikings at 10.
And you got to wonder if this was what they kind of envisioned originally. You got to wonder if they were trying to talk to uh, New England or even one of those other teams. Maybe they thought JJ would fall to them at 11. Clearly, they felt that they needed to jump up this one spot and get their guy. Is this their guy, or did they see something else happen in the draft that this was more reactionary? A lot of questions to consider. But nonetheless, it seemed like McCarthy got a decent pop from the crowd, of course, with the draft being in Michigan.
Just shitty state.
Not gonna lie, I kind
Shitty
of
football
see JJ as kind of like a Zach Wilson.
they call
He's not
they
really
called him
standing out
Alex
well
Smith
in the
on
NFL.
NFL Network.
Hey, what's so bad about Alex Smith? Former playoff QB for the Washington football franchise.
Pretty happy about that.
And as we thank you for listening to our first 10 draft pick coverage, we're going to be taking a quick break here, giving our vocal cords a bit of a rest. Obviously, a very interesting first 10 picks for this NFL draft. No defensive players taken. First time in many, many years, maybe the first time in draft history. And we will bring it back to you with the Philadelphia Eagles pick in all likelihood in about 8 or 9 selections. We thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon. And we are back with our draft coverage. We have made it all the way to the 22nd pick. Chop Robinson has just been taken by the Miami Dolphins. Philadelphia Eagles are now on the clock. We, of course, bring back Jacob Brassard with his help analyzing this Philadelphia Eagles pick. It's been a weird draft, Brassard, and we've been with you for the entire experience. What's your thoughts going into this with Chop Robinson just being taken off the board and not many defensive guys being taken so far?
I really think Howie went into this draft wanting to take an O tackle with Tyler Gowden from Oklahoma being kind of the sole guy left you'd think would be on the Eagles' first round draft board. It's probably a tricky spot for them to take him here at 22, especially when you still have 0 cornerbacks taken so far in the draft. You have a lot of options there, but that could create a lot of tricky decisions come training camp because the Eagles already have, I believe, 12 cornerbacks on their roster right now, including Darius Slay, James Bradbury, Avante Maddox, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, and Isaiah Rodgers. You all would think would be on the team, and one of their top special teams player in Mekhi Gardner. So I think cornerback makes sense here, but how many cornerbacks can you realistically go into the 2024-2025 season with?
Yeah, you have to think that somebody's going to be the odd man out there in that room, but at the same time, it is a position of need. Obviously, it would have been nice to get one of these premier tackles. I was partially hoping that somehow the Commanders would be able to get their hands on one, but it seems that a lot of these guys are being drafted here and going like flies.
I was just gonna say, yeah, seeing a lot of offensive tackles and just offensive linemen in general taken so far in this draft. So I'm curious to see what that means for what the Commanders will do at 2 and 3. I mean, with their second and third picks, obviously, coming up here quickly in the second round. But as for what the Eagles do here, my guess is as good as yours. I'm gonna probably just go with what the Eagles expert in the room here, Brass, thinks, as he probably knows best. But that looks like a room that's about to make a call.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to be playing the pick in soon. I'm gonna say they go with Arnold here. I think they try to stick with the SEC routine here. They take one of the top cornerbacks out of Alabama. But I think that does have a strong implication that we might not see a guy like Bradbury making the roster come start of the season. He might be a potential trade candidate for some low value. They can't keep everyone in that room.
Yeah, and this is an Eagles team that's not far removed from being a Super Bowl contender. You guys definitely need some help on the defensive side of the ball, and this is certainly the draft for you guys because you were able to stay in your spot and select a high level defensive guy, maybe a guy that should have even gone in the first 15 picks. Uh, and you didn't have to do with trading away any capital. So I think this is a net positive for your team overall. And I mean, this just adds to a series of good drafting to your team. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, still see what this pick is, but if it is ends up being an O tackle and Tyler Gowden, I think that has huge implications for what Dallas is going to be doing in just 2 picks. I think if an O tackle is available, that they'd like to go there, but if not, they might have to be forced inside and take an interior lineman with the 24th overall pick too.
Yeah, we haven't really seen any particular interior linemen go yet. There's still guys available. Some of these tackles I could see maybe that have been picked getting slotted around. Um, particularly some of the more recent picks. But nonetheless, we've got 2 important picks to make before that Dallas pick in the Eagles, and of course my Jacksonville Jaguars up next.
Yeah, it's definitely a tight race coming down here. Eagles using a lot of the clock. I think they might not have known what to go with here. I do think the 3 guys who it's most likely to be are Terrion Arnold, Quinion Mitchell, and I think Graham Barton is underrated as a center. I mean, you just lost the Kelsey brother, who's been playing at that role for a long time, and I feel like Barton could be a guy that could fill that role. But Quinion Mitchell, I mean, Brass, you say you like him. I think this could be the time where he gets picked.
I think Barton has a lot of potential, but I don't know if the Eagles would want to go with a center outside of Cam Jurgens. He's been around Kelsey. He's got to learn from him a lot. They drafted him originally to be Jason Kelsey's replacement when they were unsure if he was going to retire last year. And on top of that, he's had the opportunity to practice the brotherly shove for a couple of years now, definitely taking snaps of that at practice. So if you draft a guy like Barton to be your center, he's going to have no experience. I think that's going to be huge implication for the Eagles on who's going to play that position, is having that experience and not losing that play in their playbook.
And that's certainly fair. I think, no matter what happens here, you guys ended up in a very positive position with your pick, really having sort of an amuse bouche of whatever sort of defensive play you'd like here. And I think no matter what you go with here, it's going to be a positive addition to the team. Obviously, this is an Eagles team that's sort of looked a little bit different throughout the entire time here that you've been a fan in the past few years. And you had a guy like Kenny Pickett, and obviously sort of bearing the lead here, but the Giants' #1 rusher of all time, in my opinion, at least during my lifetime for sure, and Saquon Barkley. How do you feel about this team, especially knowing that you're going to be getting a pick of the litter guy and you have, such a dominant offense to build around?
I mean, there's so much potential with a team. Like with a roster this talented, I think if you have a 9-win season, that's a bust of a season. It's an 11-win plus season to have a decent year. I think divisional round of the playoffs maybe is going to be the expectation from fans going in. So hopefully going to be a big year, but I definitely think Nick Sirianni will be really on the hot seat if things don't kind of happen like they did last season where they have a big fall off and don't quite hit that expectation. I think there's definitely a lot of pressure from the coaching staff to have a good year. And the pick is in, and it is Quinion Mitchell from Toledo. Eagles get the top cornerback in this year's draft.
Yeah, what do you think about that? And I mean, you do talk about the slide last year. It was new offensive and defensive coordinators for you guys, and this is really, the another piece of that defensive coordinator puzzle. How are you feeling?
It's a very uncharacteristic move of Howie Roseman, typically not attacking the defensive back position early in the draft. Typically, they try to acquire cornerbacks, either do free agency or trade like they did with Darby or Darius Slay. So change of pace, getting a young guy into the room, be able to maybe learn behind either Slay or Bradbury, and as we're moving to more of a 2-receiver league kind of across the board, Giants adding a receiver today, I think it's going to be important to have young guys that can run and keep up with some big bodied receivers. And it seems like the athleticism receivers getting better and better every year too. So getting ahead of that early, definitely can't hate that. But who's going to replace Lane Johnson if he retires in the next few years is still going to be a huge focus for the Eagles going forward, and going to be a huge hole if they go into that unprepared.
And it's interesting to see a player out of Toledo be selected in the first round of the draft. Nonetheless, yeah, this is a guy that was on a lot of draft boards, one of the top cornerbacks. He is the top cornerback selected in this draft. And you were talking about it, somebody, with the first rounder being spent on the Eagles, who's going to be that odd man out of that cornerback room now?
I really think it's going to be Bradbury coming off a pretty tough year. Obviously, kind of got a lot of heat for the way the Super Bowl ended with that pass interference call 2 years ago. And he just really didn't look like himself. To be fair, wasn't put in some easy positions last season, at being asked to play slot corner with some of the injuries that happened there. But just really didn't look like himself. Didn't see the same ability to jump balls like we were seeing when he was on the Giants and when the Eagles first acquired him. And so I think that's a guy that's either going to try to get traded or really even might just not make the team and think the young guys or special teams players that are going to be on the roster. Because he's not a guy you can ask to play special teams, but Malik Gardner is someone that you can.
Wow. I mean, that's a big name, pretty big name that would be the odd man out there. He's probably making a little bit more money than some of those other players as well. So,
100%.
And not to mention something else that I was thinking of. In two games against the Eagles this year, Sam Howell looked like a generational quarterback. And that probably isn't by coincidence. I think the secondary is clearly an area that the Philadelphia Eagles needed to address, and they do so by taking a cornerback, Quinion Mitchell, here in the first round.
And I think when you look at the almost historical collapse that they had kind of midway through the season there, starting with a loss to the 49ers, it was the defensive back room that was really where they were falling behind, and they couldn't stop big plays. They were inconsistent with their coverages. It seems like a different guy every single drive was missing their responsibilities, and addressing that right off the gate with this draft, I hope will make a big difference, and having a little bit more cohesiveness and maybe a bit more depth to that room too should definitely help them out.
And this, we talk about how interesting of a draft this has been. Certainly, Quinion Mitchell is one of those guys who is going to be, looked at as, the first cornerback off the board. He's going to be the measuring stick for the rest of the guys that come later on in the draft who end up being drafted later on in the draft. And we are back for our final draft pick of the night. The Dallas Cowboys will be selecting a player at the 29th overall pick in the first round. Obviously, we've waited a long time for this one. It looks like they still have a few of their guys that we felt like they might be going for still on the board here. Obviously, the top 3 guys still left, according to NFL.com, being Nate Wiggins, Tyler Guyton, and Ladd McConkey. Now, Tyler Guyton is a guy who we've talked about a lot here, going to possibly the Cowboys, obviously looking for more offensive line help after losing Tyron Smith this offseason. Jacob, any sort of feeling about this draft pick? Do you obviously waited a long time for this. It's the Joneses believe they went for value by trading back. What's your feeling right now, besides tiredness?
Yeah, that's that. The fact that the pick was in within like 30 seconds leads me to believe that Guyton will be the pick here. But they traded back hoping he'd be there. and they were right, and they will be drafting an offensive lineman.
That certainly seems to be a safe assumption here.
But wouldn't the most Jerry Jones pick be Mitchell?
It would be Adonai Mitchell. A guy with a lot of raw talent, and sort of a connection to the Texas area, obviously. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see who they choose here as we wait for the pick.
I was gonna say another Jerry Jones pick would be a maybe not as hyped up or relative unknown Michigan defensive lineman. It seems that they love doing that.
Mozzie Smith,
Mozzie Smith last year, and then who could forget?
Taco Charlton.
You took the words out of my mouth. The legend of Taco Charlton, just an absolute stud pick for the Dallas Cowboys. On my screen, I'm watching the commissioner walk out to the podium right now. Not sure what you guys are about to see, but it appears that the wait is finally over, and we will hear the Dallas Cowboys selection. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma. And Jacob with a little bit of Nostradamus work here, getting it exactly right. They trade back. They get their guy, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma.
Good job this draft night. I think this is, trading back, getting that extra third round pick, since they seemingly don't have enough players to fill out a roster currently. And then protecting Dak Prescott after they lost so much on the offensive line feels like a perfect day one of the draft for the Cowboys.
Well, that is for certain, filling an important hole on the roster, getting a guy who ultimately it feels like you guys have wanted since the beginning of the draft and able to do it much later in the draft and save some money too. Obviously, financial integrity becoming very important for the Cowboys as they've decided not to re-sign a lot of guys and looking to potentially bolster the roster through the draft. So a lot of these guys will likely be on the Cowboys roster to start the season. I believe that will do it here for us, folks, as we at the Going Commando podcast have enjoyed bringing you this draft special for 2024. For my co-host, Chris Clark, from our special guests, Jacob Brassard and Jacob Shetterly, we would like to say thank you for listening, and HTTR and HTTC.